The people who control, you never had to lift a finger. You did it for them. Every time you reacted, you handed them the wheel. Every time you explained yourself, you confirmed you needed their approval. Every time you stayed loyal to someone who had already shown you exactly who they were, you paid a debt that was never yours to pay. You've been calling strength. It isn't. It's the oldest trap in human history, refined by men who understood power long before you were born. And by the end of this video, you'll recognize yourself in at least 3 of the 7 ways it's been quietly running your life. 500 years ago, a man watched princes destroy empires not through weakness, but through the need to respond to everything. He served in the courts of Florence during a time when one wrong reaction, one careless explanation, or one moment of misplaced loyalty could cost a ruler his title, his fortune, or his life. Machiavelli didn't write about ignoring people because it sounded clever. He wrote about it because he watched it decide who ruled and who got buried. Watched it separate the princes who kept their thrones for decades from the ones who lost everything in a single season. What he understood then is the same thing that decides your standing today. The question was never whether people would come for you. They always do. The question was whether you'd hand them a reaction to work with or give them nothing at all. None of what follows requires you to become someone cold, someone cruel, or someone who stops caring. It requires you to notice 7 specific moments where caring gets confused with something else entirely. Moments where instinct convinces you that reacting, explaining, or staying loyal is the responsible thing to do, when it's actually the exact thing draining you. Some of these will feel obvious the second you hear them. Others will feel like they're describing someone else, right up until they don't. Here's the first trap, and it doesn't look like a trap at all. It looks like standing up for yourself. Someone says something about you, and your chest tightens before you've even decided how to feel. Your fingers are already moving toward the reply button. You're drafting the comeback in your head before you've finished reading the message. Maybe it's a comment left under something you posted. Maybe it's a coworker's offhand remark in a meeting that was really aimed at you, and everyone in the room knew it. Maybe it's a text from someone who knows exactly which words will get under your skin, sent at exactly the moment they know you'll see it. You tell yourself you're defending your name, protecting your reputation, refusing to be disrespected. That's the story you tell. Here's what's actually happening. You just let a stranger, or worse, someone who barely thinks about you, decide the next 20 minutes of your emotional life. You didn't choose that. And you said yes, responding. Think about the last time this happened. Count the minutes you spent crafting the perfect reply, deleting it, rewriting it, reading it back 3 times before you sent it. Now count how much time the other person actually spent thinking about you afterward. The math never favors you. It never has. There's a version of you that doesn't do this. Not because that version doesn't feel the sting, they feel it exactly the way you do, but because they've separated the feeling from the action. They read it, they feel the heat rise, and they close the app. No play. No screenshot sent to a friend for validation. Nothing. And here's what happens next, almost every time. The person who sent the message is left wondering, did it land? Did they see it? That uncertainty does more damage in 1 hour of silence than any comeback could do in a week of arguing. Somewhere, this same instinct has played out at a much larger scale, by someone whose composure became the story people remembered. A strategist insulted publicly in front of allies and enemies alike, who said nothing, ordered nothing, and simply continued the meeting as though the words had never been spoken. His silence became the story people told afterward, not the insult itself. Machiavelli called this the discipline of the prince, who refuses to be provoked into a battle of someone else's choosing. He observed that rulers who answered every insult spent their reigns fighting battles they never needed to fight, while the ones who let insults die in silence kept their strength for the wars that actually mattered. Ask yourself how many hours this year you've spent composing a response nobody needed from you. If you actually added it up, it wouldn't be minutes. It would be days. And here's the reframe you need to sit with. Every time you feel that familiar tightness in your chest, that's not a signal to act. It's a test, usually sent by someone who has no idea they're even sending one, to see whether you still hand over control where you always have. The people who pass that test aren't the ones who never feel provoked. They're the ones who've learned to feel it and do nothing with it anyway. The second trap is dressed up even better than the first. It wears the costume of honesty. Picture someone who never explains themselves, not because they're hiding something, but because they've simply decided that not everyone is owed an account of their choices. Someone asks why they didn't show up, why they made that decision, why they changed their mind, and they answer with a shrug or nothing at all. People call them arrogant behind their back. And yet, somehow, those same people never stop trying to get close to them. They bite it back. They get given the benefit of the doubt, again and again. Nobody chases the person who explains everything. Everybody chases the person who explains nothing. And here's what you've been doing instead: over-explaining. Not because you're a liar, but because you've confused explanation with integrity. Someone questions a decision you made, and instead of letting the decision stand on its own, you build them a case. You give them your reasoning, your timeline, your justifications, piece by piece, like you're on trial and they're the jury. Maybe it's your manager asking why you took a different approach on something that was entirely within your judgment to decide. Maybe it's a friend asking why you didn't invite them somewhere, and you find yourself walking them through your entire guest list logic like you owe them a formal defense. You've done this over something as small as why you left a group chat, and something as large as why you ended a friendship that had already run its course. Either way, you gave them the exact same thing, a full account freely offered to someone who never had the standing to demand one. Somewhere, right now, there's a leader making a decision nobody outside the room will ever get an explanation for, and nobody questions whether that's fair, but because explanations were never the price of respect. Confidence was. What you don't notice is that every explanation is an admission that they had the right to ask. You've been putting people on a jury who were never appointed judges. Machiavelli warned that a ruler who justifies himself to every subject teaches every subject that his authority is negotiable. A prince who explains every decree to the peasants isn't seen as fair. He's seen as unsure of himself, and unsure rulers get tested constantly by everyone forever. The moment you explain to someone who didn't earn the explanation, you've told them your boundaries are up for debate, and they will treat every future boundary exactly the same way. Add up every explanation you've given this year to people who never had the right to ask, and you'll likely find hours, maybe days, spent building cases for a jury that was never real. Notice the pattern here. It's not that explaining is always wrong. It's that you've never once stopped to ask whether the person in front of you had actually earned one. Not everyone who demands a reason is entitled to receive one, and giving it anyway doesn't make you fair. It makes you available to be pulled into anyone's courtroom on demand for free. Ask yourself something. Why do you think the most respected person in any room is usually the one says the least? It's not because they have nothing to say. It's because they understand something you haven't fully accepted yet. Every unnecessary word is a door left open for someone to walk through and take something from you. The third trap is the need to be understood. It feels noble. It feels like connection. In practice, it's one of the most expensive habits you have because it convinces you that your peace of mind depends on someone else's opinion changing, when it almost never actually does. Somebody misreads your intentions, twists your words, assumes the worst version of you, and you can't let it go. You need them to see real you. So send the paragraph. You explain the context they missed. You wait, refreshing, hoping the message lands and changes their mind. Maybe it's a message in the family group chat that got read the wrong way, and now you're drafting an explanation at midnight instead of sleeping. Maybe you even rehearse what you'll say if they bring it up again, building an entire defense for a case that was never actually going to trial. And even when it does land, even when they finally say, "Oh, I get it now," what did you actually win? Nothing changed except you spent an hour, sometimes an entire evening, of your one life trying to manage a stranger's opinion of you. If you tallied every hour spent trying to be understood by people who were never going to change their minds, across a single year, you'd likely find entire weekends gone, spent on an argument that ended the moment you stopped feeding it. Machiavelli never chased the understanding of people who weren't essential to his position. He let misunderstandings sit uncorrected if correcting them cost more than they returned, because he understood something most people never do. Your reputation with the wrong person was never actually yours to control in the first place. Being misunderstood by the wrong person costs you nothing. Chasing their understanding costs you everything: your evening, your peace, and eventually your instinct to trust your own version of events over someone else's. There's a difference between being known and being understood by everyone, and most people never learn to tell the two apart. Being known means the people who matter to you actually get you, over time, through consistency. Being understood by everyone means you've spent your life performing clarifications for an audience that was never paying attention to begin with, and never will. The first 3 traps cost you your time and your peace. The next 4 cost you your future, because they don't just drain a moment. They train the people around you to know exactly how to reach you whenever they want something. And once someone learns how to reach you, they rarely forget. The 4th trap hides inside what feels like loyalty. It's the refusal to walk away from people who've shown you repeatedly who they are. You know this pattern in your own life. The friend who only calls when they need something. The relative who criticizes every choice you make and calls it concern. The person who apologizes beautifully and then does the exact same thing 3 weeks later. The same argument, the same broken promise, the same disappointment wearing a slightly different outfit. You keep answering. You keep giving them another chance, another explanation of how their behavior affects you, another conversation that changes absolutely nothing. You call this patience. It isn't patience. It's a subscription you forgot to cancel, and they're not paying for it. You are in energy, in time, in the version of yourself that gets smaller every time you shrink to accommodate them. Think about how many times you've had the exact same conversation with the exact same person, hoping this time the outcome would be different. It never is. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern that only survives because you keep funding it. There's a different way this goes. Someone reaches their limit with a person like this, and instead of one more conversation, they simply stop. No confrontation, no dramatic goodbye, no paragraph explaining why. The access ends. The messages stop getting answered at the speed they used to. The invitations stop happening. Within weeks, that draining person has quietly become irrelevant to their life, and they never had to justify it to anyone, including the person they cut off. Someone in your circle has likely already done this with a parent, a sibling, or an old friend from a life that no longer fits. quietly stepped back, without an announcement, and found that the relationship either repaired itself on healthier terms, or confirmed it was never going to. Machiavelli believed that severing ties cleanly, without lingering explanation, was safer than a slow negotiated exit that left the door open for return. An open door gets walked through again, every single time without exception. This isn't about cutting off everyone who's ever disappointed you. Everyone disappoints you eventually. It's specifically about the ones who've shown you, more than once, that nothing changes after the apology. The first time is information. The second time is a pattern. Everything after that is a choice you're making, not something being done to you. The fifth trap is the most misunderstood one on this list, because from the outside it looks like coldness. It's actually the opposite. Think about someone in your life who is available to everyone, all the time. They answer every text within a minute. They drop plans to help anyone who asks. They're never busy, never unreachable, never hard to reach. Now think about how you treat that person. If you're honest, you take them a little for granted. Not because you're cruel, but because scarcity is what teaches value, and they've never been scarce. You've never had to wonder if they'll respond, so you've never had to think about them the way you think about someone who might not. Now think of someone who isn't always available, someone whose time you have to actually earn. You think about that more. You wonder what doing. You feel a small flicker of anxiety when they go quiet for a day. That flicker isn't accidental. It's what happens automatically when presence isn't guaranteed. And here's what you've been doing instead. Treating your availability like proof of your character, when really it's been quietly training people to expect you on demand. You answer at 11 p.m. because you don't want to seem rude. You say yes when you meant to say no because canceling feels selfish. You've built an entire identity around being the reliable one, the one who always shows up, without ever asking what that reliability actually costs you in the moments no one else sees. Every one of those moments taught someone that your time has no price. This is why the busiest, most in-demand people you know somehow also seem the calmest. Not because they have more time than you, but because they've stopped treating every request as an emergency requiring an immediate yes. Machiavelli observed that a prince who is too accessible loses the reverence that makes people value his attention in the first place. A ruler who could be approached by anyone, at any hour, for any reason, stopped being seen as a ruler at all. Reverence isn't built through availability. It's built through the discipline to withdraw before you're taken for granted, not after, because after the damage is already done, and rebuilding scarcity takes far longer than it took to lose it. This doesn't mean disappearing on the people who genuinely matter to you. It means understanding that your presence is worth something, and that something loses its value the moment it's handed out unconditionally to anyone who asks for it, regardless of what they've done to deserve it. Before we go further, you should know something about the man behind these ideas, because it changes how you should hold everything you've just heard. Machiavelli wrote The Prince while exiled from Florence, stripped of his position, living outside the city walls in near poverty, hoping the very rulers he was advising would read it and bring him back into power. He wrote letters to friends describing his days, reading philosophy in the morning, gambling with local farmers in the afternoon, all while composing most influential political text in Western history at night, alone, by candlelight. They never him back. He died in relative poverty and obscurity, understanding political power with more clarity than almost anyone in history, and still unable to reclaim any for himself. Understanding these principles was never enough for him. It won't be enough for you either, if you only understand them and never apply them. Knowledge you don't use is just another form of the explaining, the justifying, the performing you're supposed to be walking away from. The man who taught the world how power actually works spent the rest of his life on the outside of it, because knowing the rules and living by them turned out to be two entirely different disciplines. The sixth trap is the one that convinces you it's already too late to change. It sounds like a question. Haven't you already reacted too many times for anyone to believe the new version of you? No. And here's why that question is a lie your old habits are telling you to keep you predictable. People don't remember your reactions nearly as precisely as you think they do. What they remember is the pattern, and patterns can change starting with a single instance. You've probably spent years assuming changing how you respond to people, required of announcement, some declaration that you're different now. And that belief alone has kept you performing the old version of yourself long after you were ready to stop. The moment you don't respond to the bait that used to work every time, the pattern breaks, and it breaks immediately, not gradually. Someone tests you the way they always have, expecting the old reaction, and gets nothing back. Watch what happens in their face when that happens. The confusion, the second attempt, the slightly loud provocation, trying to find the version of you that used to answer. That silence recalibrates the entire relationship in real time. They don't need a track record of your new behavior. They need one moment of it landing, and from that moment forward, they treat you differently, whether they admit it to themselves or not. This is the part almost nobody tells you. The people who've known you longest are often the last ones to notice you've changed, because they're the ones most invested in the old version of you staying exactly where they left it. Every relationship you have is running on outdated information about who you used to be. The good news is that information updates faster than you think, the instant you stop confirming it. You don't need permission to become someone different than the person people expect. You don't need a public announcement, a dramatic confrontation, or an explanation for the shift. You just need the next moment where the old you would have reacted, and the discipline to let it pass instead. That single moment does more to rewrite how people see you than years of trying to convince them with words ever could. The seventh trap is the deepest one, and it's the reason the first six exist at all. It's the belief that doing something is always safer than doing nothing. You feel this every time a situation goes wrong, and your instinct is to act immediately, fix it, address it, respond to it, control it. Doing nothing feels like losing. It feels like weakness, pretending to be wisdom. But think about every time in your life a situation resolved itself simply because you didn't insert yourself into it. The rumor that died because you refused to feed it, the one that would have spread twice as far if you'd sent even a single message denying it. The conflict that dissolved because you didn't escalate it. The person who eventually revealed exactly who they were without you having to say a single word proving it to anyone, including yourself. There's an old story, often told in courts of power, about two rivals locked in an escalating public feud, insult after insult, accusation after accusation, until one of them simply stopped responding entirely. Within a season, the other looked unstable, obsessive, chasing a fight that had already ended without him noticing it had ended. There's a particular kind of relief in watching a situation resolve itself without you in the middle of it. Proof that you were never actually as necessary to the outcome as your instincts insisted you were. Most of the damage in most conflicts isn't caused by the original problem. It's caused by everyone's need to immediately do something about it, which is usually just anxiety wearing the costume of action. Machiavelli's entire philosophy of statecraft rested on this. The ruler who understands timing, who knows which battles resolve themselves if left alone, holds more real power than the one who fights every battle immediately in front of him. Inaction isn't the absence of strategy. Sometimes it is the strategy, the hardest one to execute, because it requires you to sit with discomfort instead of resolving it the moment it appears. This is the trap that all six before it were pointing toward the whole time. Every reaction you didn't have, every explanation you didn't give, every tie you finally cut, every hour of presence you stopped handing out for free, all of it was practice for this exact skill. Learning to let something sit unresolved without your involvement, and trusting that you don't disappear just because you stopped inserting yourself into everything. So here's what you do with this, starting tonight. First, the next time someone sends you something designed to provoke a reaction, set a rule. You're not allowed to respond for at least 1 hour. Write the reply if you need to, get it out of your system, but don't send it. Most of what feels urgent in the moment feels irrelevant an hour later, and that gap alone will stop half your worst reactions before they happen. Second, pick one person in your life you've been over-explaining yourself to, and the next time they question a decision you've already made, answer with 1 sentence instead of 5. Resist the urge to fill the silence that follows. Let it sit there uncomfortably. Notice how much less power the moment has over you than you expected. Third, identify one person who has never once reached out first, who only appears when they need something, and simply stop initiating with them for 30 days. Don't announce it. Don't explain it. Just watch what happens to the relationship when your effort disappears from it. Whether it recalibrates into something more mutual, or whether it simply confirms what you already suspected. You've been giving away your power your whole life, and you didn't even notice it because it never looked like giving anything away. It looked like defending yourself, being honest, being available, being loyal. It was never any of those things. It was a subscription to other people's control that you kept renewing without reading the terms, month after month, year after year, without ever once asking whether it was still serving you. That subscription ends the moment you stop reacting, stop explaining, and start choosing silence like it's the weapon it's always been. Not silence out of coldness, not silence out of avoidance. Silence as a decision, made deliberately, by someone who finally understands what it costs to speak when speaking was never required. This channel isn't going to tell you it's easy. It's going to keep showing you exactly how the trap works, point by point, until recognizing it becomes as automatic as falling into it used to be. That's the only real advantage anyone's ever had over anyone else. Not louder, not smarter, just harder to read. Somewhere right now, someone is composing a message they think will get a reaction out of you. Let them wait. Somewhere, someone is expecting explanation you no longer owe them. Let the silence answer instead. You already have everything you need to stop handing your power away. You just needed someone to name the 7 ways you'd been doing it, and you just found the person who finally did.